Hey, what's going on, everyone? Good Mike War Commentaries back at you with episode 532, up here a day early this week. Surprise, surprise. I had a very rare Tuesday night off this week, so I was able to kind of put my show notes together and get things prepared a little bit earlier than normal. And it's a good thing because we have a ton of shit to discuss in this episode. It was a very, very eventful week of TV on Monday Night Raw and Smackdown Live. And it's funny because prior to this week, I was thinking that if we had a slow news week and we had a lackluster Raw and Smackdown, that I would probably skip a podcast episode, just come up here and do a live stream on Friday or something like that. But we had the complete opposite of a slow news week and nothing going on Raw and Smackdown because there's so much stuff to get into here, it's going to take us forever. So we're going to run through all of the news on Raw and Smackdown, talk about Roman Reigns' return and Batista's return and all of that stuff. I'm also going to get into some other wrestling news, like the departure of Arn Anderson and the rehiring of Bruce Prichard, which is super interesting. And I'm also going to run through the current and rumored Fastlane card, and we're going to put together my version of what the WrestleMania card is starting to look like to me. I'm coming up with about 15 or 16 matches for this show. I mean, there's going to be a lot going on at WrestleMania, so we're going to discuss all of that throughout the duration of this commentary as well. So stay tuned for this jam-packed episode. And speaking of episodes coming to the channel this week, I have tentative plans to go see the movie Fighting With My Family on Wednesday, the day that this podcast is uploaded. So provided that all still happens and I go see the movie, I will probably come up here and give you guys a review on it because many of you have been asking me to review the movie. So if I'm able to see it, I'll probably come up here with a one-off episode sometime this weekend. So stay tuned if you want to hear my review on Fighting With My Family, because so far it's getting really good reviews, and those of you that have seen it have all been telling me on social media that it's really good and I should check it out. So that is the plan. We are also approaching 26,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel, so if you have not yet subscribed, please do and help me out. And let's get those likes up. Let's shoot for at least 200 or 300 likes on this video. I would very much appreciate that. You can also download the MP3 of this episode over at my website, goodmikewarcommentaries.com. And for those of you who mentioned to me last week that my show was not showing up in iTunes, I think it was delayed a day or two for whatever reason. It's kind of out of my control. I looked into it. I was submitting it like I always do every week, and I was everywhere else. You know, I was showing up on Stitcher Radio and those sites, but for some reason I wasn't up on iTunes right away, and it took a day or two. So I don't know if that's going to be the case this week or not, but if you do regularly listen to me on iTunes and this episode doesn't show up, just give it some time. It should show up eventually. In the meantime, you can always check me out on Spotify or Stitcher or my website or right here on YouTube. So keep that in mind. Let's dive in here and start getting into all of this news that we're going to discuss tonight. And right at the top of the list is Roman Reigns. And of course, we're going to open up with him. Roman made his return this past week on Monday Night Raw. He opened up the show and he was advertised to be on the show to give the fans an update on his condition and his battle with leukemia. And from the moment that this announcement was made on social media, we as fans kind of all speculated the same thing, in that it would be very odd for WWE to bring Roman Reigns to TV to announce bad news. It's only been 4 months since he forfeited the Universal title and made this announcement to the world, and that hasn't been very much time. So I would have been really shocked if things got that badly for Roman that quickly and he was coming out on TV to announce his retirement. There was just no way they were going to bring him back in this setting to make that announcement. So we knew it was going to be good news. And I think what we were all hoping for was the announcement that his leukemia is in remission. And then secondary, we were curious about when or if he's going to be able to return to the ring. And we got both announcements on Monday Night Raw. Roman came out to the ring to a lot of love from the audience. Now, he did go to college in the state of Georgia, and Raw was in Atlanta, and he was very warmly welcomed by the audience, which is nice to see because, you know, we know how the fans can be with Roman Reigns. So the fact that the fans show that there actually is a beating heart in those black souls at least gives me hope for the wrestling humanity going forward in the future. But Roman was not shit on by the crowd. I think everybody at the end of the day, no matter what your opinions are of Roman Reigns or how he's used or if you like him or not or whatever, nobody wants this guy's life to be in jeopardy. And it's nice to know that the fans actually care about whether or not this man lives or dies. And we've been seeing Roman Reigns very busy since his departure from WWE. He was in Hawaii filming that Fast and the Furious spinoff with The Rock. He's been doing other personal appearances here or there, and every single time we've seen him, he's looked to be in amazing shape. He looks very good, looks very healthy, doesn't look sickly or weak at all. And these were all very good signs. You know, we were all speculating that, man, this guy looks like he's already on the comeback trail much earlier than we expected. Now, none of us are doctors. You know, some people have had leukemia affect themselves or their families or a loved one. So some are more educated than others. But one thing that none of us, I don't think, really thought would happen is that he would be back this fast. Some of us thought it might be a minimum of a year or a maximum of 3 years and potentially never wrestling again if the leukemia is relentless. But now for the second time in Roman Reigns' life, he's in remission. And when he made that announcement to the fans and said that he was in remission, it warmed my heart to see the pop that he got. I mean, the fans literally came out of their seat and applauded. They popped hard, probably the biggest pop Roman Reigns has ever received in his life. And once he made the announcement of being in remission, he said, since I'm in remission, that means that I am back. So I was thinking Roman would announce that he's either in remission or doing very well, and he's going to be coming back very soon, maybe in a couple of months, 6 weeks, maybe the summertime, something like that. But no, he is back and ready to rock and roll right now. And later on in the night, we'll talk about this in a minute, he would even get physical. So I wasn't expecting that. Roman is back on TV now full time, apparently anyway. I don't know if he's going to dive right back into house shows right away or if they're going to hold him off and really start using him after Fastlane, or if he's even going to have a match at Fastlane, which he might because Baron Corbin was talking shit on Monday Night Raw, and that might be the first guy lined up for Roman Reigns to annihilate. So the good news here is Roman Reigns has survived this latest battle with leukemia. His disease is in remission, and he did it much, much faster than any of us expected. 4 months is awfully fast, and I couldn't be happier for the guy. I'm thrilled. I'm relieved because that was a very scary situation. You know, that's something that wrestling fans really haven't dealt with yet. And by the way, if you want to hear my one-off episode on Roman Reigns' announcement from back in October, I will put the link to that up in the cards if you want to check out my thoughts from that night. But seeing that that was only 4 months ago, it's just incredible that this guy is back, and I couldn't be happier. I'm just thrilled for him. He was getting a ton of love, not only from the fans, but all of his peers and people all over the wrestling world, whether they work for WWE or not. Everybody was sending their best to Roman Reigns on social media, especially on Twitter, and all of that was nice to see. Now, one thing I'm not going to spend too much time on, because I think it's ridiculous, and it blows my mind that this level of stupidity exists. It shouldn't blow my mind. You know, the wrestling fans rear their ugly head all the time, but I think one of the most disturbing and just heart and stomach sinking comments that I was seeing from fans during all this is the insinuation that WWE planned this whole thing, that the Roman Reigns leukemia announcement was a work and a ploy in order to get Roman Reigns cheered. That WWE is so hell-bent to make this guy a monster babyface that they would risk all of the potential backlash and the complete destruction of their company, all in the name of Roman Reigns being cheered by fans. You have got to be a special kind of fucking stupid to even suggest that that would be a possibility. All you have to do is think it through, and a normally functioning brain will say, well, nope, wait a minute, there's no way that's a work. But I think the hatred and the cynicism towards Roman Reigns is so strong that the fans will allow their judgment to be clouded that badly and even suggest something like that, where anybody else in Roman's position making that announcement and coming back 4 months later, these same fans would be singing the praises about how strong they are and what a great fighter they are and how happy they are for him or her. But since it's Roman Reigns, you know, they're all suspect. They're all suspicious about it. And all you have to do is just think it through. Think something through. How hard is that for these ADD blithering fucks to be able to think that hard? If you're standing around one of these people and you start smelling smoke, that means they're actually trying to think. And if you actually think this through and what the consequences would be if the WWE actually tried to pull a stunt like that, that would be company suicide for them. With all the advertisers immediately pulling back, WWE works with cancer foundations and cancer research charities all the time. Most of the Make-A-Wish kids that WWE works with are affected by one form of cancer or another. You've got thousands of employees in that company, and you've got thousands of people listening to this. Just about all of us, nearly every single one of us, has or knows someone close to them, whether it be a family member, friend, coworker, whatever. Cancer in some way has affected your life. I could maybe understand some of these suspicions or some of these conspiracy theories if this was the Attitude Era, because back then they were playing around with miscarriages and all sorts of shit. You know, they were touching subjects that WWE would never touch now. But as far as today's version of WWE 2019, absolutely not. You know, I know WWE loves Roman Reigns. I know Vince McMahon's up his ass and absolutely wants him to be the face of the company, but there's no way this company would risk everything just to try to get this guy cheered by the fans. And if it was a ploy and the cancer announcement was a work, this is the worst fucking idea WWE has ever had, because they brought him back too soon. He's back 4 months later, and sure, the cancer storyline might get him cheered, but it's only going to get him cheered for a short time, because mark my words, even though the fans showed Roman Reigns a lot of love on Monday night in Atlanta, it is not going to take long for this guy to be booed again, which means WWE would have gone through that whole charade all for him to get cheered for 1 or 2 or 3 weeks on TV. I'm thinking a month max. I'm thinking by 2 weeks, you're going to start hearing the boos again, which is why I think on Monday Night Raw, we saw Roman right kind of back affiliated with the Shield. So it's just insane that type of cynicism exists out there, and it makes me lose what tiny, fractional, minimal amount of respect I had left for that group of the wrestling community. I virtually had no respect for them at all, but if I had a little, it's gone now. It seems to be one thing after another with these people. Once they get a stick up their ass about somebody, whether it be Roman Reigns or Charlotte or Cena, it turns into this bombardment of phrases that are stupid people's idea of smart things to say. And we get showered with it at all times. So to the fans that actually think this is a work, and the fans that would actually suggest that about Roman Reigns, someone who has a life-threatening illness and something that will likely, in the end, wind up taking his life someday, to let your cynicism and dislike for somebody take over critical thinking is a very, very scary thing to witness in this world. So if you are one of those fans, please do me a favor. Don't have any kids, and please, whatever you do not ever vote. I'm begging you. Now, Roman Reigns would not be done. Once he made the announcement that he was back, his music started playing, he was slapping hands with all the fans. Seth Rollins came out to join him on the stage. The two shared a hug. Now, later on, Dean Ambrose would have a match, a no disqualification match against Drew McIntyre. They've had a little issue the past couple of weeks. Ambrose, of course, has been rumored and confirmed by WWE to be leaving the company when his contract is up after WrestleMania. And it's been very interesting and very kind of fun, I dare say, how they've been handling Dean Ambrose on TV. And one of my favorite things about Dean lately is that he seems to be going full R-Truth on us, because now he doesn't even remember that he turned on Seth Rollins the night that Roman Reigns forfeited the title. It's like that never happened. You know, last week he was asking Seth during the promo, hey, where were you out there? I think he even approached Roman and Seth backstage on Raw too, didn't he? Before his match, I think. I can't remember, but it's kind of funny. I really enjoy Dean Ambrose's behavior, and that he seems to be getting more unpredictable with each week, and I've been real back and forth on this thing. Initially, I called out him leaving as a potential work, and I think in the end he might stick around with the company. And I'm starting to think that more and more. I mean, WWE and the McMahons back in December, they came out and said that they're going to start changing things, and changing how the product is presented and how they normally do things might not be the norm anymore. And I think this angle with Dean Ambrose leaving, so far they are handling it like none other in the past. And maybe at the end of this thing, we see Dean Ambrose stay with the company, especially now that Roman Reigns is back. They can do more Shield stuff. And he lost that match to Drew McIntyre with help from Elias. Now, Ambrose came out earlier on and interrupted Elias. So Elias in the past couple of weeks has been a pretty over babyface turned into a heel. Ambrose has been a pretty over heel turned into a babyface. We don't know what the hell's going on here. But Elias would come out in the Ambrose and McIntyre match to extract revenge with the guitar on Ambrose. I think he bashed him with it, rolled him in the ring, allowed Drew to get the win. And then Drew and Elias and Baron Corbin and Bobby Lashley, who also came out there, all joined in the post-match attack, and the four of them started beating the shit out of Dean Ambrose until Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns come out to make the save. Roman threw a few Superman punches, looked pretty good in there. They ran off all four guys, and there was no celebration with the Shield. You know, Seth and Roman didn't help up Dean Ambrose or anything like that. They just left the ring and left Dean in there by himself. But it does now leave us with a ton of questions, and now Roman Reigns being back also really changes the landscape of WrestleMania. Because had Roman Reigns not announced that he was back and he was making his in-ring return, and he was going to say, hey, I'm still a couple of months off from returning, then I expected him to be tied into WrestleMania somehow. A lot of fans were like, oh, WrestleMania doesn't need Roman Reigns. Sure it does. Put your hatred for this guy aside for one goddamn second and just think about this. Seth Rollins is Roman Reigns' homie. Seth Rollins is, essentially taking the place, filling the void of Roman Reigns. He's getting the title shot against Brock Lesnar. He's Roman Reigns' good friend. Don't you think Roman would want to be there in some capacity to back up his friend? Would it really be the end of the world if Roman Reigns was in Seth Rollins' corner? Some people wanted Roman Reigns to be the referee. I thought that would have been a bad idea. I want to see Seth Rollins beat Brock Lesnar. Now that Roman's back, that might actually not happen. But prior to Roman's return, I was thinking Seth would beat Brock, but if he does, I certainly don't want Seth to beat Brock because his best friend was the referee. Keep the stripes off of Roman Reigns. We don't need him as the referee. But having him there in some capacity made all the sense in the world. What are you talking about? This guy's the world champion. If this was 2000 or 99 or 98 and Stone Cold Steve Austin, 5 months before WrestleMania, said that he has leukemia and he had to forfeit the title. And then WWE a few months later found a way to tie him into WrestleMania in a non-wrestling role. Would you really say that he doesn't belong there? Would you really say that it doesn't make sense for him to be there? No, you wouldn't. So get the fuck out of here with that. But all of that speculation as to what Roman Reigns' role at WrestleMania will be has completely changed now because now he's going to be in the ring. And the immediate opponents that lay before him are the ones we saw on Monday night. And I don't know if they have time to put together a Fastlane match. Next week is the go-home show to Fastlane. So they might put the Shield together. Roman, Ambrose, and Seth against Lashley, Corbin, and McIntyre. They might even throw Elias in there and make it a handicap match. 3-on-4. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see that. And it would be a nice way to kind of ease Roman Reigns back into the fray here instead of putting him in one-on-one matches right away. Put him in some six-mans with the Shield or some tags with Seth. And Seth apparently is not cleared either. We haven't seen him in the ring for a while. So I don't know, what the extent of Seth's injury is or if he can even make an appearance at Fastlane and get in the ring or not. I really don't know. But that kind of looks likely. If it's not that and Seth is unable to compete, then I think we'll probably get a Roman Reigns versus Baron Corbin match. And that will be the first person put in front of Roman Reigns, which is actually a smart move because as much as the fans may not like Roman Reigns, I think we can all agree that Baron Corbin is a pile of shit and none of us really like this Applebee waiter turned wrestler. So if you put Roman in there with Corbin, at least you can maybe prolong the boos arriving for Roman Reigns because everybody is going to be perfectly fine with Baron Corbin being speared and pinned. And then you got to start thinking about what Roman Reigns does moving forward in the Universal title situation and save it. Stop typing right now. If you're down there in the comments saying, oh, they're going to bring Roman back and immediately put him in the world title situation, he doesn't deserve that. What are you talking about? He forfeited the title. He's not Finn Balor. He's not Daniel Bryan. Some of these other guys that have forfeited the title and then WWE forgot about and never gave a title shot to again. This is Roman fucking Reigns we're talking about here. So, of course, the way he gave up that title, the only reason he's not champion is because he had a life-threatening illness. So, of course, you got to put this guy right back in the title situation. So how do they do it? Let's speculate. Let's throw some ideas out there. Hit me with them in the comments. Here's some of my ideas. If Seth Rollins does indeed defeat Brock Lesnar and wins the Universal title, which I really want him to, it's going to be really hard for Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns to feud as friends, especially with how much emotion we were seeing out of Seth Rollins when Roman Reigns made his announcement. Seth was very broken up about it, very devastated about it, and very worried for his friends. So for me, it would be really hard if Roman Reigns gets the first title shot after WrestleMania for Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns to have a babyface program. Even if it's built on mutual respect, I don't know with the leukemia thing if that's something that Seth Rollins would want to do. The Seth Rollins character, that is, would want to fight his friend that was just in the battle for his life not 4 months ago. So I'm almost thinking you got to do some sort of a heel turn. And with WWE doing things a little bit differently lately and them having us scratching our heads here or there, and it does seem like they're making small efforts to throw some curveballs at us, what if you do a heel turn at WrestleMania? What if you have Roman Reigns turn heel? What if he turns on Seth and Brock Lesnar retains the title? And speaking of Brock Lesnar retaining the title, now that Roman Reigns is back, what do you think the odds are of WWE having Brock retain against Seth Rollins, and then go on to face Roman Reigns after that, and they have Roman beat him again. As much as I hated to see Roman Reigns go, one thing I have been saying in the past few months on my podcast is that now that he's gone, this forces WWE's hand to have somebody defeat Brock Lesnar who's not named Roman Reigns. So with Roman Reigns coming back now, before WrestleMania even happens, now I'm worried that Seth isn't even going to be that guy. And I think you need to have somebody out there on your roster that can say they defeated Brock Lesnar clean, because nobody's really done it. It's a short list since his return. John Cena beat him in Extreme Rules. Triple H beat him at WrestleMania. The Undertaker, I think, beat him with a low blow. Goldberg squashed him at Survivor Series. Take a look at those names. What's one thing that all of those names have in common? They are old, tired veterans on the verge of retirement or already retired. You need a current guy. You need a current guy on your roster that's going to be there for many years to come to say that they defeated Brock Lesnar clean. And I think Seth Rollins has the best resume currently of everybody on that roster, especially when you tie in the history that Seth and Brock already have. So Seth has been my guy for months. I would really hate to see these plans change. I hope that he winds up winning the title. But if the women are going to main event WrestleMania, maybe they throw us a curveball. We all thought Brock was going to lose the title last year, and he wound up beating the holy hell out of Roman Reigns and left him laying in a pool of his own blood and piss right in the middle of the ring. So he might turn around and do that to Seth Rollins. We don't know. All we do know is that Roman is back, and that's probably going to dramatically affect any plans that WWE had for WrestleMania, and they might find themselves in a situation now where they've got to rewrite stuff. And I think that's what might be going on. So let me know all of your ideas. Hit me in the comments below. What do you think they're going to do at WrestleMania now? What do you think Roman Reigns' role will be? Because he will have a match at WrestleMania. Don't even type. Don't even say it. I don't even want to fucking hear it. Oh, Roman shouldn't have a match at WrestleMania. Yes, he should. Shut up. He's going to have a match at WrestleMania. Provided he's healthy, he's going to have a match at WrestleMania. And hell, given what we've seen Vince McMahon do lately, and I'm going to talk about the stunt that he pulled on Smackdown Live here in a little while. Given the fact that Vince McMahon has been really into kiboshing title matches at the last minute and replacing people. You know, he did it to Becky Lynch, and then he did it to Kofi on Smackdown Live. What if Vince pulls the rug out from under Seth and replaces him with Roman Reigns? And that turns into a whole nother storyline. So there's a lot of stuff they can do. So I'll be interested to hear all of your ideas down below. The other major news coming out of Monday Night Raw was another return, the return of Batista. Now, the main event segment for Monday Night Raw was the heavily advertised 70th birthday party of Ric Flair. There was a whole bunch of legends on hand for this. They were going to have a big celebration in the middle of the ring in the main event. And I was doing my live stream on Monday night, and I was watching the clock, and I was looking at the time. And there was only 10 minutes left in the show before they even started introducing people, before Triple H got in the ring and started bringing out guys like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and others to get in the ring. There was like 3 minutes left in the show, because there's no overrun anymore on the USA Network. So we knew we only had 3 minutes left, and Flair hasn't even come out there yet. So we knew something was up. So as they finally introduce Ric Flair, you know, with about 3 minutes left to go in the show, the camera cuts to backstage, and we see someone dragging Ric Flair's body through the corridor. And it turns out to be Batista. Holy shit. What a swerve. Didn't see that coming at all. We heard rumors that Batista was in the building. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com mentioned something about it on Twitter, so I think the confirmation was there. We knew Batista was there, but I wasn't expecting him to be used in this way. We've heard about the potential Triple H and Batista match at WrestleMania. We've heard all of these rumors. So normally, under normal circumstances, I guess it wouldn't be that much of a surprise for Batista to turn up on TV, because we have heard the rumblings of his potential return for WrestleMania. But I was not expecting this. And for Batista to turn heel and attack Ric Flair in this way, and then look in the camera and he says, "Do I have your attention now, Hunter?" Talking right to Triple H. They're tying in reality. They're sewing in a little bit of reality in this storyline, because Batista has been very open and vocal on social media about wanting another run, about trying to contact WWE, and WWE not returning his calls and not getting back to him, and it was pissing him off. So the fact that they brought him in and said, "Hey, why don't we use some of this just to get you extra heat?" I am all in on this shit now. I had zero interest whatsoever in a 2019 version of a Triple H and Batista match. I wasn't even a huge fan of the 2005 version of that match, so I really wasn't terribly excited about that idea 14 years later. But now that you do it this way, this can be fun. This is what you need. Because we probably know that physically that match is not going to be a whole lot in the ring. But if you add all of this drama and you do it in this way, I think it could be a lot of fun. Because Batista, I love Dave Batista. I was never really a big fan of his in the ring. Never really thought he was that good, to be honest with you. But I love Dave Batista, the human being. I have a ton of respect for the success that he has had, especially in Hollywood and in the movies, and him making a career for himself outside of WWE. I respect his outspokenness. I love that he does not, suck the dick of WWE, and he's not afraid to speak his mind no matter who he's friends with. He's pretty tight with guys like Triple H and Ric Flair, and Batista's gone on social media and called out Stephanie McMahon before. He literally gives zero fucks, and I respect the hell out of him for that. And I always felt bad the way we all treated Dave, myself included, back in 2014, with that whole debacle with Daniel Bryan when he returned at the Royal Rumble and won it, and WWE that year was trying to do with Batista what they've been doing with Roman Reigns, shoving him down our throat as a babyface. And if you remember that year, he actually eliminated Roman Reigns last, I believe, in that Royal Rumble, and the fans booed their asses off. It was kind of the beginning of WWE fans really sabotaging the product. I think it all really started that night. And all of us, myself included, took it out on Dave Batista. Oh, this is bullshit. Nobody wants to see this guy, blah, blah, blah. Where at the end of the day, it wasn't Dave's fault. Batista was only doing his job. He was only going out there and doing what he was told. It was WWE being so damn out of touch and not realizing that the fans were screaming for Daniel Bryan, and they're trying to present Batista to us in the same way as Daniel Bryan, as some, beloved babyface. It just wasn't going to work out. Now, luckily, WWE realized that, turned Batista heel, inserted Daniel Bryan into the main event of WrestleMania 30, and everybody was happy in the end. But it was a disastrous start, and it was a disastrous run and return for Batista in 2014. And I always thought it was such a crummy ending for him. And he deserved better, not only from the WWE, but from all of us fans. So now that he's back for what has got to be his final run, because Batista's old, and whether or not this turns out to be his retirement program, or if it's just one match with Triple H, or if they have a couple of matches, or if he works through the summer and into SummerSlam, and he's then done, and then he goes into the Hall of Fame or something like that next year, I don't know. We don't know what the future holds for Batista, but we do know he's now on a collision course with Triple H at WrestleMania, because Triple H left the ring and ran to the back to try to find Batista, but he was gone. He just left Ric Flair laying there. So luckily, Ric Flair is not dead, but Batista tried to murder him on Monday Night Raw, and that's going to add a ton of heat to this storyline. And there was someone that threw out the suggestion in the chat that they do a Hell in a Cell match between these two. And I agree. That could actually work, because you now have enough heat that would warrant a Hell in a Cell match. I'm not a big fan, of the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view where they just start throwing people in the cell for no reason. You have to have a reason to have the cell. And it's not like a cell at WrestleMania is uncommon. We just had one a couple of years ago with Shane McMahon and The Undertaker. So why not? And the cell, I think, would also help maybe conceal some of the limitations that Batista and Triple H are going to have in the ring. If you put a big cage over top of them, have these guys get some color, the fans are going to forget all about that the match probably isn't that good in the ring. And if they can add some extra drama and they can add some blood and you can tie in Ric Flair somehow, I think that could be a possibility. So I would be open and perfectly fine with putting Batista and Triple H inside the Hell in the Cell. And the only other thing that I'll mention about this feud, and the one big condition I have for this feud actually working and getting over and being enjoyable, is you have to keep Stephanie McMahon away from it. She needs to steer completely clear of this entire situation between the two of them, because I'll tell you what right now, the second that she bitch slaps Dave Batista, we can forget about Batista being a heel, because he will be instantly babyface the minute her dirty fucking hand touches his face. So, Stephanie, I'm begging you, if you must be involved in WrestleMania, just stick with the women, get right in the middle of that Ronda Rousey and Becky and Charlotte situation, and just stay over there and stay the hell out of this program with Batista and Triple H. Please and thank you. And speaking of Becky Lynch, she was also on Monday Night Raw in something that I didn't like, to to be honest with you. It was a complete carbon copy of what they did with Stone Cold Steve Austin 20-some years ago. And she was arrested on Monday Night Raw. Now, there was a tag team match with Ronda Rousey and Natalya taking on the Riot Squad. And Becky shows up in the audience with the crutches again. And she's kind of held back, but she breaches security and she knocks out Natalya. That causes the referee to ring the bell, so the match gets thrown out, or I think the Riots won via DQ. There's a scuffle and a pull-apart with Becky and Ronda Rousey, and the cops and security come and arrest Becky Lynch for trespassing because WWE said, or Vince or Stephanie or Triple H or whoever, they said that she's suspended for 60 days, and if she appears at these shows, she will be arrested and charges will be pressed. So they arrested Becky Lynch, and it was even the same thing. It was like they were cuffing her, and she had her head up in the air, and she's talking shit exactly like Stone Cold did in 1998. So it was the same type of deal, but not pulled off nearly as well. I'm all for Becky Lynch crashing parties. I thought Becky was going to show up at Ric Flair's party. That's what I thought they were going to do. I thought it would be Becky attacking Ric Flair, putting him in the disarmer and telling Triple H to insert me into that WrestleMania main event or I will break your mentor's arm. That's what I thought they were going to do. That's why the Batista thing was such a pleasant surprise because I didn't see it coming. Came out of left field. And what was interesting is that Becky Lynch went to jail and Batista did not. Batista attempts to murder a senior citizen, and all's fine. He's allowed to leave the building. He's probably at Arby's right now. But yet Becky Lynch just comes out there and shows up in the crowd, and they throw her ass in the slammer. So our justice system is broken, y'all. But no, in all seriousness, I'm not really a big fan of what they did on Monday night, but I still think we all know this is all just part of the storyline to get Becky and Ronda and Charlotte together in the triple threat. Now, what was interesting about this, and another good idea, I think WWE probably made the right call here too. Later on, I think there was another match or a commercial break or something. Ronda Rousey ends up coming back to the ring. She gets on the mic and she calls out Vince McMahon. And she doesn't get Vince McMahon. She gets Stephanie instead. And basically, Ronda demands that Stephanie reinstates Becky Lynch and puts her back into the main event at WrestleMania because now Ronda Rousey is so pissed off that Becky keeps attacking her with this damn crutch all the time that she wants revenge. And she feels that Becky didn't deserve to be suspended to begin with, and now you got to put her back in the ring with Ronda Rousey. Stephanie refuses, basically just says no, and that's when they kind of throw another swerve at us, something else I didn't see coming. Ronda Rousey says fine. She takes the belt off of her shoulder and lays it in the ring, and she basically says, hey, you give me Becky Lynch or you have no WrestleMania main event. So that's pretty good. You know, that's Ronda Rousey holding them hostage now to be able to put Becky Lynch in because we know WWE does not want Ronda Rousey to be booed. And that's part of the reason why they made Vince McMahon and Charlotte out to be the bad guys, with Vince pulling Becky from the match and putting Charlotte in her place. And now with Ronda going to bat for Becky Lynch, maybe this is WWE's way of trying to curb those boos on Ronda Rousey. Now, at the end of the day, once you get Ronda and Becky in that ring, whether it's one-on-one or a triple threat, those fans are going to be pro-Becky and anti-everybody else. So Ronda's going to get booed, I think, regardless, but this is probably going to help her maybe in the eyes of the fans that are so quick to boo her. If it turns out to be Ronda in storyline that's responsible for Becky being added to this match, then, you know, maybe WWE feels the fans will take it easy on Ronda. That still remains to be seen, and I'm skeptical, but I think that's what they are thinking in their heads. So at the end of the day, I think we're going to see something transpire in the next week or so. They might even make a match at Fastlane with maybe Becky and Charlotte, but Becky's doing the injury angle with her knee too. So even if they want to reinstate Becky Lynch next week, she might not be quote unquote healthy enough to work a match at Fastlane. A lot of fans are pitching the idea of Becky versus Charlotte and the winner faces Ronda Rousey, but I don't think they're going to do that either. I don't think it's going to be one-on-one. I think at the end of the day, however they get there, whatever road they choose to take, the destination is going to be a triple threat. And if you did Becky versus Charlotte at Fastlane, I know it's real easy to say, oh, Becky Lynch should beat her and then go into WrestleMania to face Ronda Rousey. It's not that easy. WWE, I hate to break it to you, is not going to have Charlotte lose at Evolution, lose at Survivor Series, lose at TLC, lose at the Royal Rumble, and lose at Fastlane. That's a whole lot of losing right there for somebody that the fans claim is Charlotte Reigns. So I think that another loss at a pay-per-view for Charlotte, knocking her out of the WrestleMania main event, is not what the WWE is going to do with her. Then what does Charlotte do at WrestleMania? I want to see Charlotte face Asuka. That's what I've said all along. But there you go again. If that happens and Asuka beats her, then you can tack on another pay-per-view that Charlotte's lost. Now it's Evolution, Survivor Series, TLC, Rumble, Fastlane, and WrestleMania that Charlotte has lost. So I don't know if I see a Becky Lynch and Charlotte match at Fastlane. I don't see it. I think they get there some other way. And if they do wind up doing that match at Fastlane, I still don't think that's the end of the story. Here's what I'd do if they did that match at Fastlane. Let's say next week they reinstate Becky Lynch and say, okay, fine, you're going to face Charlotte at Fastlane and the winner gets the WrestleMania match. They've done that match a bunch of times. There's been plenty of years where we've had the WrestleMania main event on the line at the February or March pay-per-view. We've seen that plenty of times. So if they did go with that Charlotte and Becky match, you know what I would do? I'd have Charlotte win. I'd have Charlotte win and freak out the fans even more. Holy shit, we'd have Category 5 freakouts going on if that happened. Because the fans, we all know, have no patience for anything and can't see anything through. So if I was WWE, I would keep twisting their arm. I would keep running this angle as long as possible, right up until the very last minute. Put Becky Lynch in this match. And it would also give Charlotte a win, because she's lost at all these pay-per-views in a row. So it's time for her to get a win here. So if she beats Becky at Fastlane, the fans think Becky is left out in the cold, and then last minute on TV, Becky gets into that main event somehow, and it still turns out to be a triple threat, and then Becky winds up winning. You know, it avoids Charlotte stringing up 6 pay-per-view losses, and it keeps the storyline going with all sorts of twists and turns to get to that final triple threat announcement that we will inevitably get at some point between now and WrestleMania. So that's kind of what I would do if they do wind up doing a Fastlane match. But now that Becky has been arrested and Ronda is basically said, I'm not going to work WrestleMania unless you put her in there, you know the McMahons are going to have to do something on Monday Night Raw, and we will talk about what Charlotte said on Smackdown. Charlotte thinks she's showing up on Monday Night Raw next week to accept the Raw Women's title. She thinks she's the new champion already. We know that ain't going to be the case, so it should be an interesting Monday Night Raw next week as well. A lot's going to happen. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're on the other side of Fastlane, and then it's really time to rock and roll because now we're heading into WrestleMania. That was really your meat and potatoes of Monday Night Raw, despite all of the great news we got on Raw with Roman Reigns' announcement and his return to the ring, the awesome ending with Batista and Ric Flair, and the twist in the Ronda Rousey-Becky Charlotte situation. The rest of Raw wasn't that great. Even though we had all those great moments, it wasn't like the best Raw we've ever seen. I would still only give Raw, 6 out of 10 or something like that. We had a whole lot of shit on this show as well, including one match that was particularly annoying, and that was Tag Team Champions The Revival taking on Aleister Black and Ricochet. Now, I'm all for showcasing this new NXT talent. You've brought up these random guys with no storyline direction. They're having matches on Raw and SmackDown with no angles at all. Just dead matches. Just throwing guys in there to lose to these NXT talents. So if that's all you're doing, does it have to be your fucking tag team champions? They just won the titles 2 weeks ago. Their first 2 matches on TV, they've lost. They lost to DIY the week before, and they lost to Black and Ricochet this past week on Monday Night Raw. What the fuck are you doing, WWE? Can't you put Black and Ricochet in there with the Lucha House Party and have them stick those piñatas up their asses? Or put them in there with the B Team or the Ascension? You really got to put them in there with your champions. Do you realize in the last 8 days on TV, all the champions that have been pinned? We had Asuka getting pinned by Mandy Rose last week. We had Daniel Bryan getting pinned last week. We had Daniel Bryan getting pinned this week. And we had the Revival getting pinned last week and this week. Come on, WWE. I mean, that's overkill. I know that champions losing is nothing rare these days. We see it all the time. And I'm actually fine with it when it happens occasionally. It used to happen occasionally in the 80s too. Sometimes champions would lose to set up a match and set up a future title match. But it's happening way too often than it needs to be. And with all of these writers, with these insane salaries, it blows my mind that this is all they can come up with. And I just think if you're going to showcase NXT talent, don't do it at the expense of champions, especially when you have so many other people. It's not like there's a lack of opponent ideas for these guys. And Black and Ricochet is a makeshift team. They don't seem to be guys that are going to be together for the long haul. I would like to see Ricochet, get an Intercontinental title shot at WrestleMania against Finn Balor. I even pitched the idea in my last episode of that match taking place at TakeOver, defending the IC belt at TakeOver. I don't think they'll do that, but it was an idea that I had. So I would like to see Ricochet maybe go after the IC. That would be fun. So for these guys to stick together as a team, I don't think really makes any sense. I like them both as singles. I think they're both singles championship caliber talent, and that's what they should be doing. Not teaming up and beating your tag team champions that just asked for their release several weeks ago when WWE said, hey, give us a chance, we'll make you champions. Well, what good is it to be champion if you're jobbers anyway? All you're doing is carrying around some fucking replica belts. It's no different. So I think WWE needs to think some of these ideas through, man. You know, you got a whole bunch of dispensable talent back there. You got a whole bunch of guys sitting in catering, eating salad, doing nothing. Let them lose to this new talent instead of your champions. You know, unless it's a part of a tag team title program, then fine. You want to beat the champions, but the tag team champions are losing to random ass teams, and it's stupid. It's completely stupid. Aside from that, on Monday Night Raw, we had Finn Balor defeating Lio Rush. That match actually was for the Intercontinental title. We had Bayley defeating Nia Jax, and we had Lashley against Strowman that never even got started. There was just a brawl, and then we went to commercial, and it was dumb. So there was a lot of shit on Monday Night Raw in between all of those great segments with Roman Reigns and Batista and all of that. So that's pretty much your Raw in a nutshell. Before we get into Smackdown Live, though, I want to mention a couple of other items of news, and one big news item that broke this week that I did not get a chance to talk about in my last episode is that Bruce Prichard has been rehired by WWE, essentially, I guess, reprising his old role as being one of Vince's right-hand men, as being an enforcer for Vince McMahon. And speaking of enforcers, Arn Anderson was let go. I'll talk about that in a minute. But Bruce Prichard being brought back to WWE is huge news because he's in the middle of a very popular and award-winning podcast. And ironically, I'm several weeks behind on Something to Wrestle With. I have not listened. I think I'm like 4 episodes behind, so I've got a lot of catch-up to do. But I'm definitely going to be listening this week because I'm very curious. The details of this. Bruce is being brought back in a full-time creative position in WWE. He's going to be doing very much the same type of duties that he did before, and I'm really happy about that, and it's something that I kind of called out. The minute we saw Bruce Prichard back when he showed up on that Monday Night Raw as Brother Love, and the network picked up Something to Wrestle for that season, kind of a condensed version of their podcast, I said right there, and I was mentioning in episodes, that I wouldn't be surprised if one day Bruce finds his way back to the WWE. That was the initial kind of door opening to get them talking again. And I didn't think it would be something Bruce would even want to do. You know, he's got a pretty good life right now with that podcast. He's having fun. It's extremely successful. He's making money, and he's living a relatively stress-free life. For him to accept a job this close to Vince McMahon in creative, that's an extremely taxing, demanding, and stressful job for one to have. And I don't know how the hell he's going to keep the podcast up. You know, I can't see it ending. The podcast is super successful, but you would think things are going to have to change. You know, if he came back there, WWE's like, yeah, sure, you can still do the podcast. We don't care. No big deal. But when's he going to have time to do it? He might even have to move back to Connecticut for all we know. You know, hopefully not. I think he's happy in Texas, but maybe he's going to be needed back there. Maybe he's going to be needed more in the office. I really don't know. So that was kind of surprising, but it's kind of cool. I mean, I've always been a big fan of Bruce Prichard. You know, he was a big time backstage influence in the 1980s and the 1990s. You know, he worked for the company for a better part of, 20 or 30 years? Something like that. You know, he was in and out a couple of times, and he got fired, I think, in the mid-2000s when he brought a gun to the arena. And that was a whole interesting story. And Bruce has been very open and very candid on his podcast. He's talked about all of these situations, and he's talked very openly about the McMahon family and all of his experiences in WWE. So WWE bringing him back, I guess, can't hurt, because I think Bruce can be the voice of reason sometimes. Bruce was a part of the WWE back during a time when the repetitive nature of the product and this rinse and repeat nonsense and all of these mistakes and horrible booking the WWE does on a day-to-day basis, Bruce may be able to affect a little bit of that, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be Vince McMahon's call. I think what's more out of touch in WWE is Vince McMahon's mentality. So, you know, how much difference can one writer or one creative team member make? You know, even if they brought Vince Russo back, you know, what would that really mean at the end of the day? if Vince McMahon is the one approving everything. So I'm hoping that it's the little things that Bruce can contribute to, the little issues we see, like the champions being beat every week on TV and, random teams being slapped together and bringing up NXT talent for no apparent reason just to throw them out there and have random matches with no storyline, no build, no nothing, which is fine to do sometimes, but now it seems to be a big part of the show every week. Hopefully little things like that, little issues that we all have as fans, Bruce can be the guy to maybe speak up and say, hey, we need to rethink this, because it doesn't sound like those conversations happen at all. But welcome back, Bruce Prichard. Welcome home. He's been with WWE during some of the craziest times. This is a guy that was brought in to be a producer, and he was working side by side with Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan on Primetime Wrestling. He was there through all the 90s, through all the scandals and all of the black eyes on wrestling. He was there for the Montreal Screwjob, all during the Attitude Era. Every controversial thing that has ever happened. Owen Hart dying. All of that stuff. He has a tremendous amount of experience, especially in WWE's company, with the way WWE has always done things. And maybe Vince missed him. Maybe Vince wanted him back. He always had a really good relationship with Vince. All the stories he's told on the podcast have always been pretty positive, with Vince McMahon. Some of the more negative stories that he's told has always been about Stephanie and how horrible she comes off as a boss. The way she talks to you and how condescending she can be. And I'd be interested to see or hear what her relationship with Bruce is going to be like now. Because she was the one that I think really spearheaded his release to begin with back in the day. I don't think she liked him. I don't think they got along. And she wanted him out. Well, he's back now, and I'll be really interested to see how he winds up contributing to the show and what the future of the podcast is. I would suppose or assume that Bruce and Conrad will have some sort of an announcement on that on their episode this week, which I think always drops on Fridays. So in a couple of days, we'll probably have more news as to the future of the podcast. And they do live shows too. They always tour everywhere. I think Bruce has one coming up like this weekend with Eric Bischoff. So I'm curious how all that's going to work. Conrad, we know, will be just fine. He's got the Shivani podcast and the Bischoff podcast. So if Something to Wrestle With did end, I suppose his podcast career could live on. And he is also in charge of the StarCast festivities and promotion and all of that. Undertaker has even been announced for StarCast, which is crazy. And apparently they have filed for a trademark for Dead Man Talking. How crazy is that? I'm assuming that The Undertaker is going to have an interview or be doing some interviews, maybe even a shoot interview at StarCast, and maybe that's why they trademarked that. Or it's possible that the Dead Man's going to be starting up a podcast. And I think that would be cool. I would actually listen to an Undertaker podcast because my brain can't even comprehend the stories that could be told on something like that. So who knows what the future holds for Undertaker either. So a couple of interesting news tidbits there I at least wanted to mention. And I mentioned Arn Anderson a second ago. He was let go. He was essentially fired by WWE this past week, along with a few others. We saw the release of Ty Dillinger, which I talked about in my last episode. Hideo Itami was officially released by the company, although we kind of knew that had already happened. And TJP was also let go. Now, TJP was really not well liked. Apparently, he was just an annoying little prick that nobody could stand. None of the wrestlers even wished him well when he left, and I really am not going to miss him at all. I never liked anything I've ever heard from him. He's a complete idiot on social media, and he's one of the more annoying pro wrestlers that there is out there, so I will not miss TJ Perkins at all. But the Arn Anderson story was really interesting because apparently there was some sort of a shouting match between him and Vince McMahon, and Vince got so pissed off about it he didn't want to see his face again. Arn has worked for the company, I believe, uninterrupted since the WCW buyout way back in 2001. So he's been there 18 years, and he was let go because of a shouting match or a disagreement. Maybe this was bubbling up. Maybe Vince has been ready to get rid of this guy. Maybe he hasn't wanted him around for quite some time. So they let him go. And they let him go right before Ric Flair's big birthday celebration. Otherwise, we would have seen Arn in the ring on Monday night. So I wish Arn the best. I'm a huge Arn Anderson fan. I lived in North Carolina for many years. I'm very familiar with the Four Horsemen and their run back in the day, and I always had a lot of respect for Arn Anderson. I thought he was a great talent. I thought he was good on the mic. I thought he commanded attention whenever he spoke or he was out there, and he was the enforcer of the Horsemen, and he was a good old boy you didn't want to fuck with. And I was always a big fan of Arn Anderson, and I wish him well. Maybe he can be utilized in All Elite Wrestling. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago when WWE hired a bunch of new backstage talent or backstage producers and agents like Abyss, like Jeff Jarrett and Shane Helms or Gregory Helms. I speculated if WWE, or if we thought WWE might be going out and trying to scoop up a few guys that could be useful behind the scenes in order to cockblock All Elite Wrestling that might be looking for agents and producers. And maybe WWE decided to snatch up a bunch of those guys before All Elite Wrestling could do it. And that might even tie into part of the reason why Bruce Prichard was being brought back, because he's very tight with Conrad Thompson. Conrad's got a lot of ties to All Elite Wrestling, and maybe All Elite was thinking about making Bruce an offer to work in a backstage capacity, and WWE didn't want that, because maybe they wanted another shot to have his podcast on the network or whatever. So who knows what the backstory here is, but the Bruce Prichard news really surprised me because it's not a role I thought Bruce Prichard would take. But you got to think, in order to lure Bruce away or to be able to convince him to take a job like that, he must be being paid pretty handsomely. And apparently he did start on Monday night. I think he was in Atlanta, backstage working in a creative role. So he's already there. So quite the turn of events, with Arn Anderson being kicked out the door and Bruce being let back in. And maybe Arn Anderson can now go work for All Elite Wrestling. Maybe he can share his 18 years of WWE secrets with All Elite Wrestling. I suppose it's possible, but whatever Arn winds up doing, I wish him the best. I think he's a true legend, and if he chooses just to stay at home and retire and enjoy the fruits of his labor and all of his hard work, then I'd be perfectly fine with that too. So best of luck to Arn Anderson. Let's move on to Smackdown Live now. We got a lot to talk about on this show as well. And one thing I'll mention first before we start talking about the results is that we have the latest inductee for the WWE 2019 Hall of Fame class announced. It was announced earlier on in the day on Tuesday prior to SmackDown, but then confirmed on SmackDown Live. And that is the Honky Tonk Man. Will be joining D-Generation X as an inductee this year. And I'm actually fine with that. I definitely think Honky Tonk Man is worthy. He had that long run with the Intercontinental title, but I still have mixed feelings about it because Honky Tonk Man was never really my favorite guy. Even as a kid, even being a mark in the 80s, I never liked Honky. I could not believe my eyes. Don't forget, I was at WrestleMania 3. I sat in that crowd and watched Randy Savage and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat have the most beautiful goddamn match in the history of professional wrestling. And then just a few weeks later, on TV, I'm sitting on my living room floor, and I watched this guy in an Elvis costume defeat Ricky Steamboat for the Intercontinental title. I couldn't believe it. Now, the backstory on that is that Steamboat kind of had a falling out with Vince, and there was some issue of having time off, and he decided to leave the company, so he had no choice but to drop the belt. But I couldn't believe that he dropped it to Honky Tonk Man. I always thought, even as a kid, that the Honky Tonk Man character was a joke. And he not only beat Steamboat for the title, but he would go on to hold it for well over a year until the Warriors squashed him at SummerSlam. So that run alone, I think, automatically makes Honky worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. I've just never really been a fan of his character or his work in the ring or him personally. He's like Jekyll and Hyde. Go on YouTube and look up Honky Tonk Man shoot interviews. You're going to find some, like the one he did with Hannibal, a very long shoot interview, very good shoot interview, where he's respectful, he's well-spoken, even soft-spoken, speaks highly of everybody he's ever worked with. Even when he has complaints or critiques, he does it in a respectful manner. And then there's other interviews where he is just a vile, grotesque, offensive son of a bitch. So when you go online, I've just never been a fan of, Honky's personality. He just sounds like an asshole. So he's going into the Hall of Fame, which is great. I'm sure he will be well behaved. I'm sure he'll behave himself and give a very nice speech. And we'll laugh and reminisce about all the great times in his career. But he's kind of a surprising announcement. And another thing about this Honky announcement that makes the Hall of Fame interesting is I'm starting to lose faith and lose hope that the Hart Foundation are going into the Hall of Fame. They were the first ones rumored a few weeks ago. All of the credible news sites reported on it, but we've heard no confirmation from WWE. And now with Honky Tonk Man going in, you got to remember who his manager was. It was Jimmy Hart. And I'm not saying Jimmy Hart is the only option to induct Honky Tonk Man into the Hall of Fame, but he's the best option. But if Jimmy is going to be inducting the Honky Tonk Man, I can't see him also going in as an inductee with the Hart Foundation. I don't think anybody's done double duty like that yet, where they've inducted someone but also went in themselves. So if their plan is to have Jimmy Hart induct the Honky Tonk Man, then Hart Foundation might not be going in unless Jimmy does not go in with them. As a fan, I want to see the Hart Foundation go in. I can't believe they didn't put him in already. It's another one of these cases where WWE puts someone in after they die, and we've missed the opportunity to see them being inducted when they're alive. If you ask me, the Hart Foundation should have gone in years ago, but maybe WWE didn't want Bret to become a 2-time Hall of Famer before Shawn became one. And as a big fan of 90s wrestling and as a huge fan of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, I would love to see both of them become 2-time Hall of Famers in the same night. And maybe with DX going in, WWE didn't want to stir up any bad feelings in Bret Hart. Bret Hart seems to be over everything, but you can still tell in his interviews he still holds resentment and he can still be bitter. And if Bret Hart has to be there and watch D-Generation X, the faction that was very influential in him dropping the title and the screw job and him going to WCW and all of that, I don't know if that would be a hard pill for Bret to swallow or if that's not stress the WWE would put on him. But the more we go on here, it's starting to look like Hart Foundation might not be going in this year after all. I hope they do, but I'm starting to think they're not. I also saw that Taz is another name rumored to go into the Hall of Fame this year, and I think that's great. I am a big fan of Taz. I loved his run in WWE, not his wrestling run, but his on-air role in WWE. I always thought he did a good job. I thought he was a fun announcer. He would host a lot of WWE's DVD specials and shit like that. And if he would have stayed with the company, Taz is a guy that I can see having a show on the WWE network. I like Taz's podcast too. I think he's got a pretty good podcast. So I'm a big fan of Taz. It would be a perfect place for him to go in New York. Perfect setting for that. Bam Bam Bigelow is another guy, Jersey native, that needs to go into the Hall of Fame this year. WWE would be idiots to bypass Bam Bam Bigelow when they're in New York. So I really hope they put him in. Of course, we want Brian Pillman. We want the British Bulldog. We want Owen. I would love to see Rick Martel go in the Hall of Fame as well. Demolition, the British Bulldogs tag team. There's a ton of names out there that can go in. But if it turns out to be Taz, they're going to get no complaints out of me. Moving on now to the results of Smackdown Live. The show opened up with another big surprise. They started out with the contract signing for Fastlane WWE title match, Daniel Bryan defending against Kofi Kingston. Stephanie McMahon and Shane McMahon are both in the ring presiding over this thing, and after a little bit of chatter on the mic, Daniel Bryan winds up signing the contract. Kofi has got the pen in his hand, about to sign on the dotted line, when Vince McMahon interrupts. Comes out again, gets on the mic and congratulates Kofi Kingston for all of his hard work, but says that in the interest of what's best for business, he's going to replace Kofi with Kevin Owens. And Kevin Owens returns. Kevin Owens switches brands more than the Big Show turns heel. How many times now has he jumped from Raw to SmackDown? I'm starting to lose track. Owens comes down to the ring. He gets a pretty nice welcome from the crowd, pretty nice pop. And he gets in the ring and he signs the contract. If I was Kofi, I would have signed the contract when Owens was walking down to the ring. Owens winds up signing it instead, and just like that, they've switched the title match at Fastlane last minute to Daniel Bryan versus Kevin Owens. Now, there's a lot of good about this and there's a lot of bad about this. Let's start with the good. Number one, this tells me that WWE is rethinking their idea for Kofi Kingston. This tells me that WWE hears what the fans are saying about Kofi, and a lot of the fans, ever since Kofi's performance on SmackDown a few weeks ago and at the Elimination Chamber and his performance last week in the Six-Man, the fans have been calling for Kofi to get a title shot at WrestleMania. And I've already been worried that if WWE doesn't do that, that the fans are going to shit on whatever idea they have. So in that respect, I'm very happy that they threw us this curveball, because now it takes Kofi out of Fastlane. But I think in the end, what it's going to wind up doing is put Kofi Kingston in WrestleMania. I now think that he's going to somehow, much like Becky Lynch, find his way into a title match at WrestleMania, which is going to be so much more fun because the fans are going to be so behind Kofi. Kofi's going to have the same type of support from the fans that Daniel Bryan himself had years ago. And I think that can make for a really fun match and a lot of twists and turns. And if you do wind up doing that match at WrestleMania, you can have all sorts of things happen. You can do a New Day heel turn. You can have Kofi, or you can have, Big E and Xavier turn on Kofi. You can do all sorts of stuff in that match. It can be a lot of fun. So I'm hoping that this initial announcement winds up leading to Kofi getting some sort of a title match at WrestleMania. And I firmly believe that's what they're going to do. But here's what I don't like about it. Daniel Bryan, I think, is a marvelous heel. I think he's doing a great job in this role. I love his demeanor. I love the things he says on the mic. I love this new Daniel Bryan character. I'm all about it. He is so entertaining to me, and I think he's such a great heel. I don't really think you should be putting him in the ring with another heel. And some of you have been mentioning Kevin Owens as a potential WrestleMania opponent for Daniel Bryan. You guys mentioned it in the comments of my last video. We've been talking about it in live streams, and I was the one saying no to that. Because as much as I would be totally fine with Kevin Owens getting a title match at WrestleMania, I think Daniel Bryan's character works better with a babyface. You know, sometimes heel versus heel matches are fine and babyface versus babyface matches are fine. But in Daniel Bryan's case, I really think it would just be much more fun if he worked with a babyface, like Kofi. So I have no problem with Kofi being replaced. I'm just not sure if Kevin Owens is the best person for that, because Kevin Owens on Smackdown, we couldn't even tell if he was a babyface or a heel. Seems like he's a heel. He was even in the back, you know, talking to Stephanie and Shane, saying that Vince finally realized his potential and his talents and all of that. Still talking and acting like a heel, yet he's going to be working against a heel at Fastlane. And he also proposes a tag team match in the main event where he wants to team up with Kofi to take on Daniel Bryan and Rowan. And that was the main event. And we saw Kevin Owens and Kofi Kingston pick up the win when Kevin Owens pinned Daniel Bryan after a Stone Cold Stunner. Hit Daniel Bryan with a Stone Cold Stunner and pinned him. And you know what? I would be perfectly fine with Kevin Owens using the stunner as his finisher. If he placed a call to Steve Austin or something like that and said, look, dude, do you mind if I use it? And Austin gave him his blessing. Because I got to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the pop-up powerbomb. I liked it at first, but it's becoming a move that's just not that exciting and not really that realistic looking either. And the Stone Cold Stunner is always going to get a pop from the audience. And if Kevin Owens starts using that as his finisher, I would actually be very much in favor of that. So maybe that's the beginning of this. But he defeated Daniel Bryan and then celebrated with Kofi, and it's just like we don't know. And the two of them were talking as the show went off the air, and it looked as if Kevin Owens was telling Kofi, I'm only speculating here, but I want to say that Owens was saying to Kofi, hey, when I beat Daniel Bryan for the title, I will give you a title shot, like reassuring him. So I can't tell if Owens is a heel or a babyface or both. And if he is a babyface, then all of this will work out just fine with Daniel Bryan. But I have my reservations about that. I'm really not sure what we can expect right now from Kevin Owens. But at the end of the day, it does look like this is going to turn out to be good for Kofi in the end. And instead of getting the match at Fastlane, unless they add him next week and they make it a triple threat at Fastlane or something like that, you know, they could still do that. But it's starting to look more and more like Kofi Kingston is actually going to get a title match at WrestleMania. And I think that's great. And we're going to run through the entire proposed WrestleMania card here in just a minute. Another big surprise we got on Smackdown Live was the return of the Hardy Boyz. The Bar, Cesaro, and Sheamus came out there to have a match. Next thing you know, the Hardy Boyz music hit, and they're back. Jeff Hardy's already been on SmackDown, but Matt Hardy was with him. He's completely shed his Woken gimmick. Looks like he's back to being regular Matt Hardy and looked to be in tremendous shape. 2 years ago when they returned, they signed 2-year deals, and those deals are up like right now. And they had a clause in there where WWE could roll them over for a third year if they chose to, and I think that would also include a hefty pay increase for both of the Hardy Boyz. So they have apparently done that. The contract is rolling over, and now the Hardys are put back together, which you know is going to wind up leading to yet another run with those tag team titles. And now they are on the SmackDown brand. They were on Raw last time around, and you can pretty much bet that they're going to be involved in that tag team title situation somehow at WrestleMania. And it was interesting. The Bar, I think, wasn't the Bar champions going into that ladder match when the Hardy Boyz returned? I think they were. It was either the Bar or Gallows and Anderson. I forgot at WrestleMania 33 during that awesome ladder match, but, you know, the Bar gets fucked over by the Hardy Boyz again, and I'm happy they're back. I mean, given their age and everything, maybe tag team matches are the best thing for them. Doesn't look like Jeff Hardy's going to get that run with the world title. We thought that he might get a run back on top before he retires. That's looking less and less likely, but just to see the Hardy Boyz back and back in there again, pretty cool. I'm glad they're back, and I wish them the best. We also saw R-Truth coming out to finally defend that United States title that he won in a fluke several weeks back, and he was going to issue a U.S. Open challenge in honor of his idol, the man that he grew up idolizing. R-Truth says, none other than John Cena. Let's forget the fact that R-Truth is nearly 10 years older than John Cena, but he says that he grew up idolizing him, and he wants to reinstate or reestablish the U.S. title open challenge. And I said on Twitter, I was home watching SmackDown and live tweeting, I said it should be Andrade. I think Andrade is the guy that should wind up defeating R-Truth eventually for that belt, because he's been mixed up with this feud with Rey Mysterio. And I would love to see a mask versus title match between the two at WrestleMania. And I think that's what we're eventually going to get, because when R-Truth issued the open challenge, Andrade was the first one to come out, and Rey Mysterio followed him. And the both of them got in the ring, and it was pretty funny to watch R-Truth try to figure out what to do here. And he asked, what would John Cena do in this situation if two men both wanted to face me for my title? And that's when Carmella spoke up and said, John Cena would take on both of them. And R-Truth goes, he would? Damn, he's brave. I just got a huge kick out of that. And so he winds up doing it. He defends the title in a triple threat against both guys, winds up winning when he rolls up Rey Mysterio, and he escapes with the title. But what I think they're going to wind up doing eventually, whether it be next week or at Fastlane or something, they're going to have Andrade beat him for that title. That's what I would do, at least. I would have Andrade take the belt off of R-Truth, and you can set up title versus mask at WrestleMania and potentially unmask Rey Mysterio. I don't know if WWE wants to do that. I don't know if the fans necessarily want to see that. We saw it in WCW in that horrible match with Kevin Nash. It's a situation that I think everybody kind of regrets. So maybe WWE wants to try to do the unmasking angle again with Rey, but make up for all the mistakes that was made when he was unmasked the first time. Or you don't unmask him at all and put the U.S. title on him. I'm really not sure, but that match is starting to look likely given what we saw on Smackdown Live. So I'm sure we'll get a follow-up on that next week. I did mention Charlotte earlier on when I was talking about Raw. She did have a promo on Smackdown Live where she basically said that she's going to be on Raw this Monday to accept her new championship. So, like a typical heel, she's delusional as fuck, and she thinks that WWE is just going to award her the title belt, or she's just going to go into WrestleMania and face nobody, face vacant, go in there and have a match with a chair and defend the title in the main event. I guess that's what she thinks. But we know that's not going to be the case, and I think next Monday on Raw we'll get the ball rolling and at least start giving us an idea of what WWE has in their head and how they eventually get to that inevitable triple threat at WrestleMania between Charlotte, Becky, and Ronda Rousey. We also had Aleister Black and Ricochet again teaming up. This time, they defeated Nakamura and Rusev. So they're beating the Revival on Raw. Now they're beating Nakamura and Rusev. Now, Nakamura and Rusev are a pretty new tag team. They've just been put together, but I've kind of been thinking that the two of them are going to get a run with the belts at some point, and now they're losing to Black and Ricochet. So again, if you're going to have these NXT talent on the show, at least put them in there with job talent, not top guys, or not guys that are established or at least going to be contenders for the title. And I think the finish of that match saw Aleister Black pinning Nakamura. Now, that's a match I would love to see one-on-one. You know, Aleister Black and Nakamura in an NXT environment for the world title, pass the lotion. But in SmackDown in a tag team match, man, it just feels like it was wasted. And Nakamura, I don't know what his deal is either, and when his contract is up, and if he's going to bounce, because he's been such a disappointment. I thought maybe he could have new life breathed into him with this alliance with Rusev. Maybe they could get oddly over like some duos can. When you have two singles talents that aren't doing a whole lot, you put them together. Next thing you know, they're the New Age Outlaws. But this is not a step in the right direction, in my opinion, for the two of them. And hopefully it won't lead to a rematch next week or at Fastlane and another loss for the two of them. I hope not. We had an AJ Styles interview backstage where he was confronted by Randy Orton, and that has been a rumored WrestleMania match, and I'd be perfectly fine with that. Don't know if they throw that together next week in time for Fastlane or not, because we don't have too many matches announced for Fastlane yet, so they might do AJ Orton first at Fastlane and then a rematch at WrestleMania, or they hold it off till WrestleMania entirely, but that definitely looks like the direction they're going in there, and that's a pretty sexy match. You know, for no title on the line, just one feature one-on-one match, kind of like Orton and Rollins at 31 or Randy Orton and Punk at 29. Orton has had a few of these matches at WrestleManias before. So if he just goes out there and has a great match with AJ Styles on the grandest stage of them all, you're going to get no complaints out of me. I think it's a good spot on the card for AJ and Orton to be. Neither one of them are in the world title picture right now. So I guess this is the next best thing. I don't know if they're going to add any dynamics to the storyline. You know, when AJ was feuding with Samoa Joe, they tied in his family and his wife and Wendy and all of that. And Randy Orton can be very sadistic. We know that. So it'll be interesting to see how they progress with the feud and the program. But I think the match itself in the ring, if they do this at WrestleMania, should be phenomenal. No pun intended. And finally, in the main event, we saw Owens and Kofi defeat Bryan and Rowan, like I mentioned earlier on. So that was pretty much your Smackdown. And between those two shows, this week, there was a lot going on. So let's take a look now at the Fastlane card. This is what we have so far. I think officially on WWE.com, we've got Kevin Owens versus Daniel Bryan, Nia Jackson Tamina challenging Sasha and Bayley for the women's tag team titles, the Usos defending the SmackDown tag team titles against Shane McMahon and The Miz, and Asuka defending the women's title against Mandy Rose. I guess that's why Mandy Rose scored that upset pin over Asuka last week, and I fully expect Asuka to retain at Fastlane. I really want Asuka not only to be champion going into WrestleMania, but also retain at WrestleMania. And since she really doesn't have an opponent right now, unless they carry over Mandy into WrestleMania and Asuka and Mandy do it again, I'm almost thinking Asuka has a multi-woman match at this point. You know, my idea for her to have a rematch with Charlotte, that seems to be completely out the window now. They're not going to go in that direction. So maybe Asuka just has a match against multiple women to get a lot of women on the card and involved in a title match, and she can wind up retaining. So my hope for Asuka is that after WrestleMania, she is still SmackDown Women's Champion. And even with her being champion, she's not doing a whole lot right now on TV. We haven't even seen her that much. So I would like to see WWE start thinking of some shit to do with Asuka. She is a champion after all, come on. And as far as what else we could see on the Fastlane card, I mentioned the Roman Reigns match earlier on. I think we can either get a Shield versus Baron Corbin, Bobby Lashley, and Drew McIntyre match, maybe even toss in Elias and make it a handicap, or if Seth isn't cleared, or they don't want him to wrestle or whatever, you can get Roman Reigns one-on-one with Baron Corbin. And then if you want to add AJ Styles and Randy Orton to Fastlane, you could do that. You might add Aleister Black and Ricochet, you know, in some sort of a tag team match or some more NXT talent. You might add R-Truth and Andrade or something like that. There's still some matches that can be added, but next week are the go-home shows for this pay-per-view, so they better get their act together and finish rounding out this card. As far as WrestleMania goes, that's really shaping up. When I was starting to make my notes for WrestleMania and write down the matches we know about and the matches that are likely and the matches that are possible, I'm coming up with like 15 or 16 matches. Right at the top, we know we've got Seth Rollins and Brock Lesnar. Hopefully that match will not be tinkered with. Hopefully Roman won't be added or anything like that, and that match stays the way it is. So we know we've got that. We've got Batista and Triple H now all but confirmed. That'll be confirmed in the next several weeks, I'm sure. We know we're going to get Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte versus Becky. We're not there yet. Right now, this match doesn't even exist because Becky is suspended and Ronda has forfeited the title. Eventually, it'll all get put back together, and I fully expect to get that triple threat, which will likely main event the show. We also have Daniel Bryan likely taking on Kofi Kingston. There's going to be some title match at WrestleMania involving Kofi. We know that. Maybe Kevin Owens is involved as well. We don't know. But we know we're going to get Daniel Bryan's title on the line, hopefully against Kofi Kingston. I think we're going to get Shane McMahon versus The Miz. I think we're likely to get Randy Orton versus AJ Styles. We're also likely to get an Intercontinental title match, a U.S. title match. I mentioned the possible Andrade versus Ray title versus mask match. We're going to get a cruiserweight title. Buddy Murphy is going to face the winner of the tournament. We're going to get 2 tag team titles, the Raw men's and the SmackDown men's. We're going to get the WWE women's title defended. I'm assuming Sasha and Bayley will survive Fastlane, and there's rumors that the two of them might take on Trish and Lita at WrestleMania, or potentially the Bella Twins at WrestleMania. And I think one of those two matches are very likely. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if WWE puts the tag team titles on Trish and Lita for a cup of coffee. It's kind of like the Goldberg effect. I was saying that about Goldberg for so long with the Universal title, the fact that it was a new title and it's brand new and WWE's trying to develop some lineage for it. And I think it looks really good in the record books to have names like that as former champions. So even if it's a short time, Lita and Trish holding the tag team titles is something that I very much see WWE doing. I can also see WWE putting the tag team titles on the Bella Twins. So if it doesn't turn out to be one of those two matches, then I think Sasha and Bayley wind up having a fatal 4-way for the tag titles just so you can get as many women involved as possible. So we know we're going to get that match. I'm guessing we're going to get the Andre the Giant Battle Royal as usual. And I'm also guessing we're going to get the women's battle royal, or the Mae Young battle. What the hell they call it? I think they just call it the women's battle royal. So we could get the men's battle royal and the women's. We've got Roman Reigns, Kurt Angle, John Cena, and The Undertaker all potentially available to have matches. Maybe not The Undertaker, but I think Cena, Angle, and Roman will all have matches at WrestleMania. Whether it's against each other or other people, I don't know. And we could also have an appearance by The Rock of some kind at WrestleMania. So if you add all of those matches up, that's about 15 matches right there. So that's a lot going on for WrestleMania. Let me know if there's any matches I missed. Let me know if there's any of these matches that I've proposed that you would change around. You know, if you switch up some opponents or do it differently or whatever, give me your WrestleMania card. Put them in the comments below. Give me your complete WrestleMania card. I want to know all of the matches that you think are going to take place at WrestleMania, because it's starting to come together and we're starting to get a small look and a sneak peek of what this card could look like. And so far, I'm not complaining. I think WrestleMania has potential this year. So it's going to be interesting. The next few weeks on TV are going to be very, very interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here now. I know this has already been a pretty long podcast. I know it's going to go over an hour. So let me get this thing edited and up to you guys. Like I said, keep an eye out on the channel later this weekend. I should be able to have a review of the Fighting with My Family movie up on the channel. And then, of course, I'll be here this Monday live reacting to Monday Night Raw. Y'all take care and be good. I'll catch you in just a couple of days. Until then, peace.
This has been a Good Mic Work Commentaries production. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/goodmicwork. Follow Greg Morgan on Twitter @GoodMicWork and visit goodmicworkcommentaries.com for all the latest podcast and video content.